I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Well, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Well, I'm walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Let me tell you, I'm singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Well, I'm singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Don't you know it ain't no harm to keep my mind stayed on freedom. Yeah, there ain't no harm to keep my mind stayed on freedom. I said there ain't no harm to keep your mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I woke up this morning stayed. I woke up with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah,
As our story reminds us this morning, we all sometimes forget who we are. We forget what we're about at our essence. You know, Tulsa, the city of Tulsa, is most well known, unfortunately, for the race massacre that happened in 1921. In fact, just this week, there were two major feature articles, one in the New York Times and one in USA Today, telling the story once again of the race massacre of 1921 in Tulsa, because we're approaching the 100th anniversary in May. And LeBron James and Oprah Winfrey are both working on projects to tell this story on the cinema screen. And so this is what Tulsa is most well known about for across the country and even around the world, which means that Tulsa has the opportunity to take this history and make something inspiring of it, to do the work of repair and conciliation or reconciliation in order to bring the community together and be a model to show others what can be done in the aftermath of injustice and tragedy like what happened here in Tulsa. The Unitarian Universalist Association, our national body, has been calling for reparations for what happened in Greenwood ever since 2001, when the official report came out from the Oklahoma government about what happened. And so for 20 years, we've been calling for reparations to happen as a national body. And in fact, to put some support behind that resolution, back in 2001, the Unitarian Universalist Association donated $25,000 to a fund, to start a fund through the Tulsa Metropolitan Ministries here, our interfaith organization, to begin to pay an offering or gifts to survivors. They were really clear to say these aren't reparations, but these are gifts that are being given to set an example and to show that the morally right thing to do is to pay reparations to the survivors, which was what the report from the government said, from the commission of the government said should be done. And so other faith communities from all across Oklahoma, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, and others gave towards this fund. Some small but still meaningful checks were given to all the living survivors at the time. And there were actually 3 checks because the money just kept being given as it came in. Wasn't very much money, and again, very clear that this wasn't reparations, but the hope was that the faith communities, by showing this moral witness, would inspire the government and the business communities of Tulsa and Oklahoma to do the right thing and follow through on the recommendation of the commission to pay reparations to survivors and their descendants. We're going to hear more about that because this morning we have a very special guest, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner from the historic Vernon AME Church. As I said earlier, the only edifice remaining from the destruction of 35 blocks of Greenwood is the basement of that church. He's come here 3 years ago to serve that church, and he has become the voice and the leader of the movement for reparations for what happened in 1921. He and I have forged a great friendship, and we have worked together speaking at school board meetings and city hall and city council meetings and other things for justice, criminal justice reforms and other things, including reparations. He holds vigil every Wednesday night. He's been doing this for almost 3 years, going on 3 years, every Wednesday at 4:30 in front of City Hall, demanding and asking for reparations for this huge injustice that continues to stain our community. I look forward to introducing him to you this morning, and I just want to say, as a historical note, his predecessor, the Reverend Ben Hill, was a good friend and colleague of my predecessor, Dr. John Wolfe. They worked together in the civil rights movement. They forged a friendship. Reverend Hill spoke a number of times from this pulpit on the Sunday mornings in this church and also participated in other activities here. So I'm glad to introduce to you this morning my good friend and colleague, the Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. Dr. Turner, I really appreciate you being here with us this morning. From the moment, I remember the first time I met you, we were at the John Hope Franklin Symposium. You'd just come into town. We were on a panel together with Bishop Pearson, and you said some things, and I said, wow, you have come to this town at the right time. You are the right man, the right minister, and you have proven that out over the last few years. I've just been incredibly impressed to worship in your church, to march by your side, to be in strategy sessions with you about how we can make this a better city. And I'm just delighted to have you here and for my congregation to get to know you this morning. Tell us a little bit just about you, kind of where you grew up, your family, just a little bit so we know you as a man before we know you as a minister.
Well, first I want to thank your beautiful and benevolent congregation of All Souls. You all have been, and you have been the epitome of what an ally and a partner and a friend should be. Thank you for all the help, especially that you provide for our food ministry, and the help that you do, and the camaraderie that you show. I am a son of Alabama. My parents met there at school, Tuskegee, at the time called Tuskegee Institute. Now it's Tuskegee University, founded in 1881 by Booker Telefair, Washington. I was actually born at John Andrew Hospital, which was the first black hospital in Alabama and the last black hospital in Alabama. It was the same hospital that the U.S. government gave syphilis to black men, a part of the Tuskegee syphilis study. From 1932 to 1972, they infected them with syphilis and watched them suffer, and didn't even tell them when the cure came out. They just watched them suffer and used them as a study experiment. I did well in school, always active in extracurricular activities. And I played football, basketball, sang in the choir. I did all-state chorus, matter of fact, and went to Alabama, sang in the opera at Alabama.
Let's talk a little bit about Black History. This is February's Black History Month. And what does that mean to you? What do you think of Black History Month?
Growing up in Tuskegee, Black History wasn't a month, it was my life. You know, I was born on the campus of Tuskegee University, named by Booker T. Washington, who came to Tulsa and named Negro Black Wall Street, Negro Wall Street, who hired a guy named George Washington Carver, and who helped farmers in Alabama figure out what to do with all their cotton. He said you need to cross-multiply. Well, he said you need to cross-pollinate your land. And so instead of planting just cotton, which takes out of the soil, you need to plant things that enrich the soil, like peanuts. And as a result, they had too many peanuts. And so they gave him all the extra peanuts, and he came up with over 300 inventions out of just peanuts. And he never took a dime for any of his inventions because he said God gave him that knowledge. And Tuskegee is also the place where Rosa Parks was born. And Tuskegee Airmen. So to me, Black History Month, I don't reduce it to just a month because the history of the African American community is just so vast. You can't put in just 28 days. Right. But I respect the fact that our country saw the need, due to Black historians trying to encourage them, to highlight the achievements of African Americans.
Right. What sustains you? How do you sustain yourself in the face of everything that has happened in our country, everything that is happening? I've seen the pictures on the news of you being, people throwing cups and water and yelling right in your face in this town, in this city. It's in front of City Hall. I've marched with you. I've seen the mayor tried to call you out on Facebook at one point. How do you sustain your spirit, your dignified spirit in the midst of all of that?
To be completely honest, Reverend, that is a struggle of mine, to maintain sanity in the midst of insanity, to be nonviolent when people are literally throwing water and assaulting you. I have to make a concerted effort to have some daily devotionals, to kind of keep my spirit centered. I have to take a concerted effort to really draw upon historical icons. I spend a lot of time in conversation with Dr. Martin Luther King. I spend a lot of time in conversation with El Hajj Malik Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X. I spend a lot of time in conversation and reading material from people that don't even live. They've died a long time ago. Of course, read the Gospels and see how prophets have been persecuted in the Old Testament, how prophets have been persecuted, to kind of draw some inspiration, to try to grow not weary in well doing. But I will be lying to you. That is probably my biggest need of prayer, to just stay level, stay spiritual, and not react. And if you don't have a spiritual gas station you can go to and get filled, it is like you're running on fumes. Your body is not designed to hold tension. It will be released. So I've been trying to make sure that I don't just binge and eating poorly. So I'm trying to improve my diet. I try to exercise, and I definitely try to have those devotionals and read from people who've gone through this before.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And so we both have worked for and advocate and continue to advocate for reparations. So let's just talk for a moment about reparations specifically to Greenwood, because we're in Tulsa, we're coming up on the anniversary. What about reparations here?
What happened here in Tulsa in 1921 was state-sanctioned terrorism, where you had an angry mob of people deputized by the sheriff department, by the way, who descended upon over 36 square blocks of black-owned property in Greenwood. And they burned, they pillaged, they looted, they killed, And then it wasn't just enough for them to kill people. They dumped their bodies in mass graves, right? And after they did all this damage, they put the people who survived in concentration camps, in internment camps in this city.
Right.
This was not like Territory, Oklahoma. This was past statehood. This was so-called civilized Tulsa society. This was after the oil discovery of Glenpool. This was when we had people in the city who were supposed to be so enlightened,
Right.
so informed, and so well-to-do. But for that 18 hours, they acted like pure barbarians. In 18 hours, over 1,256 homes were torched to the ground. Over 600 businesses destroyed. In 18 hours, over 300 people were killed. And after the massacre, the people who survived, they submitted a claim to their insurance companies. The church our pastor submitted a claim to our insurance company. All of us categorically got denied. Meanwhile, a white insurance company a white pawn shop put a claim into their insurance company, and they got reward. They got their claim paid. And so we have in Tulsa, thankfully, due to the work of what you guys did early in 2000s, and Professor Brophy and Dr. Ogletree and Maxine Horner and Don Ross with the commission of 2001, they came out with a report, February 26, 2001. And in that report, they have 5 recommendations of what should happen for reparations. The first is direct payment to the survivors, right? Which should have been given a long time ago. In fact, immediately after the massacre, there was a committee formed, and their recommendation was to pay reparations. The mayor of Tulsa at that time said, "We don't like your report." So he disbanded that committee in 1921 and formed a new one, and they said, "We good." So it was always known what happened here was terrible. So the commission in 2001 said we need to pay the survivors. We need to pay in the absence of the survivors, pay their survivors. Pay in the absence of the survivors, pay their descendants. And then we need to have scholarships for the children of the survivors. Then we need to have an economic incubator for Black-owned businesses to come back to Greenwood. And we need to have a memorial where when we find the bodies, because they knew then they had mass graves, a place where the bodies could be interned. Not one of those recommendations have been honored. They had a scholarship, but it wasn't just limited to the survivors' descendants. If you want to call John Hope Franklin Center the memorial, I mean, you can, but it does, the memorial that they talked about in the proposal went a lot further. It was supposed to include a lot more. We still have not finished excavating the mass grave site, and definitely have not interned the bodies anywhere, and have not paid anybody. What your organization did is the only payment close to what they got in their life.
And we were clear that was not reparations.
No.
This was a moral stand on behalf of the religious communities of Tulsa across lots of denominations to say we believe reparations are due, and we want to show morally this is the right thing to do. But that was more of a symbolic act, although there was real money, but not much.
But what you all did, if I were the city, I would have been ashamed that you have private citizens doing what the city of Tulsa should be doing. Right? And so I support all 5 of those recommendations, but I add a few more.
All right.
First is there needs to be charges filed against the folk who did it. It wasn't a 1921 mass suicide. It was 1921 race massacre. And if there's a massacre, that means you have perpetrators. Not one of those perpetrators were ever charged with a crime.
We don't even have names.
We don't even have names. This city, the police department didn't make any arrests. The fire department didn't put out one fire. The sheriff department actually deputized members of the mob. We never had an investigation. So part of what I do when I go down to City Hall is I plead with the district attorney. How can you be the chief law enforcement prosecutor in this city? And in this city, it had the worst crime in this city's history in 1921, and you never investigated?
Right.
And I plead with the attorney general. How can you be the attorney general for the state of Oklahoma and you never even have investigated the 1921 race mass? I even go even higher to the United States Attorney General.
Right.
This was the first time airplanes were used to drop bombs on American soil. Not 9/11, not Pearl Harbor, but right here in Tulsa. And we have never had Homeland Security, we've never had an Attorney General ever come and investigate this massacre. Mm-hmm. So don't tell me Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. Show me the Black Lives Matter. Show me that the killing and that the innocent killing and suffering of black people at the hands of insurrections, at the hands of terrorists who came down to Greenwood, and show me how their life matters to you.
And one of the things I have often said is, I tell people say, help me understand. I don't understand the reparations. And I say, imagine I come to your house, I take over your house, and I say, this is going to be my house from now on. Mm-hmm. And then I put you and your family to work for me. I don't pay you. I give you a place to stay, but I say, you can still stay here, but you're going to go to work for me. And we build a business, and we start making some money, and some good money. And that continues for generation after generation, for centuries. And then we get, down the road, maybe 300, 400 years, and finally we all decide, our heirs decide, this isn't really fair. Mm. You took this property, and you've been taking our labor without paying us for generations now. This is an unfair system. And I go, finally we realize, you know what? You're right. This is unfair. Mm. Let's stop this. You can go, I'm gonna keep the property and all the money we've earned, but you go off and we'll just call it equal, and you go make your way, because we're all equal now.
That's right.
And whenever I tell people that, they say, wait, no, that doesn't sound fair.
That's right.
I say, well, we took the land from the native peoples, and we took the labor from African peoples, and then we built the greatest economy that the world has ever seen, mm-hmm. and yet to this day, the wealth gap between African Americans and white people is enormous, because there has not been any repair.
That's right.
Reparations, reinvestment, mm-hmm. whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And so talk a little bit about reparations, because people need a little education about why would we do that?
Yeah, in fact, I'll take it even a step further. The amount of GDP, economic GDP or wealth that African Americans hold in percentage or in per capita to the nation has not moved significantly since emancipation. Wow. So basically, we own the same amount of wealth as a people in the United States today in 2021 as we did in 1865.
Really? Wow.
And so that's including the LeBron James. I get so tired of people using outliers like, well, that's supposed to mean all black folks have arrived because Oprah Winfrey is rich.
Right.
That's including Oprah, that's including all the athletes and entertainers. We still are roughly at the same space we were shortly after emancipation. Right.
And that didn't just happen. No. It's not. This is we have redlining. Yes. We have Jim Crow segregated. We have a lot of things mm-hmm. that have contributed to making that institutionally to continue that system.
Black people were brought to this country as a commodity, not as a citizen.
Right.
And once we were emancipated from physical chattel slavery, this country didn't know what to do with us besides try to discard us. Mm-hmm. And that's why the prison industrial complex became as huge as it is. That's why Jim Crow became as wide as it was and large. That's why redlining and the things you mentioned. And so now we're at a point where, those laws have been eliminated for the most part, but there's been nothing done to correct the damage, like what you mentioned. Right. And so reparations is an attempt to repair the historical systemic damage that was inflicted upon black people. Targeted to black people. Slavery was terrible, The transatlantic slave trade was deplorable. To this day, it is still the largest mass deportation of people in the history of the world. African Americans are the only group of people in this nation that did not choose voluntarily to come here. Right. We're the only ones. Every other group of people you see in this country, their ancestor voluntarily chose, right, I want to go to America. Mm-hmm. African Americans were the only people that were happy where we were.
Right.
We didn't seek to come to America. America came and kidnapped us and made us work, changed our name, took us away from our religion. And after emancipation, we, without getting reparations, right? Well, we had it for a second when General Sherman went to Savannah, Georgia, met with preachers, and he gave them Sherman Fiddle number 15, which was signed off by Secretary of War Stanton, which was signed off by Abraham Lincoln. They were going to give us enough land. They said they had enough land off the coast of South Carolina that they had just confiscated from the Confederacy, from Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis. They had enough land to give every family, African-American families who were enslaved, 40 acres. And he said, and when you get there, we will give you a mule to help you plow it. That was called 40 acres and a mule. Mm-hmm. Well, Abraham Lincoln got shot. He got assassinated. And black people never were close to reparations ever since. America doesn't have a problem with reparations. Right. They have a problem with reparations for black people. Mm-hmm. Because during the Civil War, we paid reparations to slave owners who lost their slaves. And I went to the University of Alabama. We have a building on our campus that was built, and it says on a plaque, Manley Hall, built in reparation to the South for the Civil War. We paid it to the Confederacy, right, but we can't pay it to black people. Right. After World War II, when Japan bombed us at Pearl Harbor, we gave reparations to Japanese Americans who we put in internment camps. I support all of that. I support it to the Jewish survivors of the Holocaust. I support it to the Japanese Americans. I don't support it to the Confederacy because that was treason to me. Right. But if we can pay it to all those groups, right, why can't we pay it to African Americans? Right.
So reparations is just something that this country's been doing for a long time, has done for a lot of people, and the contribution of African Americans and African peoples to America is remarkable to help build the economy that we're all benefiting from. So, and as you know, I'm a big supporter. Yeah. And have been. I got to meet Ogletree and the others back in the day because that's when we were doing our movement through Tulsa Metropolitan Ministries for reparations. And I continue to support you. I've stood on the side in front of City Hall with you. Not enough.
Your pastor is one of the few clergy, period. Black, white, purple, brown, whatever. Your pastor is one of the few that has stood with us on Wednesdays.
I haven't done it enough, but I'm always proud to stand next to you.
You've done it more than most.
And people always want, and I'll get these calls after and emails after this about, how's that? It's unrealistic. How are we supposed to do it? Who are we supposed to pay money? Everybody wants to get to the specifics. Yeah. They jump to the specifics. And what I try to say is, let's just get clear about the moral, the economic, and the other realities. And be clear about what's due. Yeah. Then we can talk about how. There's lots of different ideas out there of how do you invest in the future of our nation and the future of African people. So America was saved, literally built and saved in critical moments by the contributions of African Americans. And so obviously something's due.
That complaint against reparations about, I don't know how it's going to be implemented, falls on the face when you have a country, when JFK said we're going to the moon, people were cheering. Right. They didn't say, well, how are you going to do that? Right. What kind of rocket are you going to use? Who's going to be the astronauts? They were applauding. Right. The only time people ask those questions is when they really don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. Because this country has shown us when we want to do something,
get it done.
We get it done and ask questions and fill in the gaps later.
People like us are often, for doing this kind of work, reparations, even that word has become so polarizing for a lot of people in our culture. Mm-hmm. So even bringing it up, advocating for it, we often get deemed as if we're trying to be polarized and that kind of thing. And you and I have talked about this before, but this is coming from a place of love.
It is.
That this is about love. And both of us are ministers who try to follow the footsteps of someone who said, love your neighbor, love your enemies.
That's right.
Love is at the essence of what we're about.
Yeah.
And so could you, in your words, could you just say a word about what is loving about this idea of repair and reparations that we're talking about?
I love Tulsa. I love Greenwood. I love the mayor. I love the elected officials. And because I love them, I got to tell them the truth. And by me knowing what happened here and not saying something about it is me not acting in love for them. It's like you go to your doctor and you hope your doctor doesn't just care for you, you hope your doctor loves you. Your doctor knows you have cancer, but your doctor doesn't want to upset you. Your doctor doesn't want to get on your bad side.
Right.
He doesn't want to spoil your day. So your doctor doesn't tell you you have cancer.
It's not loving.
That's not loving.
Right.
That's not loving, but that's what people want.
Right.
Societally, they don't want you to tell them, Tulsa, you have a cancer, and it's called racism. And unless you do something about it, Tulsa, Oklahoma, United States of America, the world, unless you do something about this cancer, it will kill you. I think King even mentioned, unless we learn to live together as brothers, we will perish together like fools. Mm-hmm. And so what gets me out of my bed, because I have several things I would rather be doing. I'm an avid Laker fan. I'm an avid college football, Roll Tide, Alabama fan.
Yeah.
I love some good food. I love to just hang out and relax.
Right.
But because I love this place that I live, every Wednesday, rain, sleet, hail, or snow. That's birthdays, that's Christmas, that's New Year's, that's Labor Day weekends, that's Super Bowl weekends. I'm right there. And I don't get paid an extra dime for it at all. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in my package at Vernon that says, hey, if you do 4 protests a month, Pastor, we're going to give you a bonus. None of that.
No.
There's nothing that I get incentive-wise for doing that. And knowing every time I put a suit on to go down to City Hall, every time I lace my shoes up, I remind myself, this could be the last pair of shoes I lace.
Right.
This could be the last tie I roll up. Because there are some sick, wicked people that don't want justice. People who don't act out of love. Mm-hmm. But I do it. Yeah. And we do it.
And I know I've stood out there next to you, and I've looked around at those cement. Yeah. I'm like, where am I going to dive if somebody drives? Because there's just cars driving right past, and you never know. I've felt that. I've stood there right by you, and I know you're putting your life in your own hands. And I stood out there with you for a while, week after week for a while. Yeah. But it's a lot. I couldn't sustain it. Your commitment, almost 2 years now?
Over 2 years. That'll be 3 years in September.
Is that right? So that is, I don't know if people understand what kind of a commitment that is. It is.
It's love. It's love. And no greater love than this, Reverend, that we believe in this book that I try to read, than one to lay down his life for a friend.
Mm-hmm. Just know that in your feeding ministry and everything else, you have friends right here in Midtown at All Souls who are ready to stand with you and work with you for justice and for what's right.
Thank you so much. Thank you to your membership, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you for joining us. For 100 years, All Souls in Tulsa has been a beacon of this free faith. We offer our services and programs freely online for all those who are interested. You can help us to do this by making a one-time gift today or a reoccurring pledge. We really appreciate you joining us and being a part of helping us make All Souls in Tulsa what it is. Thank you.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me home, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak.